You know, it's true. Every single one of us, we have the capacity to be both a truth teller and a grace giver, but depending on our personalities, depending on our upbringing, depending on the way that we are wired, we tend to lean toward one or the other. And you know, I have found that over the years, one of the best ways to determine whether you tend to be a truth teller or a grace giver is how you drive. For example, you already know what's coming, don't you? For example, if you're in traffic and there are these cars that are merging into your lane and you have no problem letting a couple pass you, or if somebody cuts you off on the road and the first thing you do is you say a quick prayer of thanks that you didn't get into a car accident, or if you're at a stoplight and there's a person in front of you and it turns green, but the person doesn't go because they're sitting there scrolling through their phone and you patiently wait for them to look up and see that the light has turned green, then you might be more of a grace giver, right? On the other hand, if you're stuck in traffic and there are cars trying to go into your lane and you straddle both lanes because nobody's going to be passing you, right? Or if somebody cuts you off and you start throwing up all sorts of gestures, you pull up alongside of them and you point your finger at them. Or if you're at the stoplight and the person in front of you, it turns green, they don't go because they're scrolling on their phone, and you blare that horn, if you do those things, then you might be more of a truth teller. In fact, just this past week, I was driving our girls to school, and there was a left-hand turn lane onto the interstate, and there were about 4 or 5 cars in between me and the car in front, and it turned green, and the girl was scrolling through her phone, and the 4 or 5 cars in front of me, for about 5-10 seconds, they didn't do anything. You know what I was doing? Honk, 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 let's go, right? You see, this morning, we're in the midst of a message series that we're calling Unshakable, Navigating Life with Wisdom. And if you've been with here for the past couple weeks, remember the main idea is this, that living a life of wisdom is understanding that our decisions are connected. In other words, the decisions we make today impact the decisions we make tomorrow, or the life we live today impacts the life we live tomorrow. Living a life of wisdom is understanding that our decisions are connected. And here's the thing, if you tend to be a grace giver, then a lot of the decisions you make are going to be made from a place of grace. And if you're a truth teller, a lot of the decisions you're going to be making are made from a place of truth. And what happens is that in our relationships with those around us, because we tend to lean toward one or the other, oftentimes our interactions with people end up only being truth or only being grace. For example, the fire chief, he had a whole lot of truth for me, but absolutely no grace. And my boss, she had a ton of grace for me, but she absolutely didn't have any truth. But see, as we're going to see this morning, living a life of wisdom is understanding that in our relationships with those around us, we need to be able to show both grace and truth. In other words, when somebody wrongs us, we need to be able to tell them that they've wronged us, but then we also need to turn around and forgive them and let it go. You see, when Jesus came into the world, this was a central theme of his ministry. In fact, one of his disciples, John, in his very first chapter, this is how he described Jesus. Take a look. He said, "The Word, that is Jesus, became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of" what? Grace and truth. You see, John wanted his readers to know that Jesus never watered down the truth, but he also never missed an opportunity to show grace. In other words, he called out sin for what it was, and then he laid down his life by dying for that sin on the cross.